This is episode 442 of the Rio Grande Foundation's Tipping Point, New Mexico. I'm Paul Gessing, president of the Rio Grande Foundation, New Mexico's free market think tank. You can find out more about the foundation at riograndefoundation.org. I am very pleased to be joined this week by Casey and Mike Petersen. They are the founders of Freedom Families United, and we'll talk a lot about that. And also, Casey, blew the whistle at Sandia National Lab. So welcome to Tipping Point, New Mexico.
Well, thank you, Paul. It's great to be on. And both of us are very excited to be here and very excited for the opportunity to talk to more people out here in New Mexico. Yes, as you said, we did back in 2020, I guess August of 2020, we blew the whistle on Sandia National Laboratories and their critical race theory practices there at the lab. And then a lot has happened up till now. Since then, we were fired eventually. We started an organization to fight back, Freedom Families United. We've been getting a lot of people to invest their time and their money in that organization and fighting back, making a difference. There's a website there, freedomfamiliesunited.com, anybody interested. We've continued to fight back, fighting critical race theory in particular, especially critical race theory and gender theory inside of our schools. And Micayle has been huge in the research in that. Mike has, my wife here, she'll tell you more about this, but has dug deeply into the research side of that, both when we blew the whistle on Sandia and digging into the schools and all the information there. We've been working with Project Veritas a little bit recently. We got some info, some of our undercover journalism coming out here soon with them, and we can do a little bit with that. We have to be a little more cryptic, and we have future undercover work we're going to be doing to uncover some more stuff inside of the schools here. And we were eventually given a radio show on AM 1600. We're live every Saturday from 1 to 3 p.m. Freedom Families United Radio, AM 1600 here in Albuquerque. And that's been a learning experience. You've been doing this for quite a while, so you know what it's like being on the radio there. But yeah, it's been a wild ride since 2020, and we've pretty much dedicated ourselves full time to fighting back for our children's future and fighting back for freedom every waking moment we have.
Yeah, so definitely a lot to talk about over the next 40 minutes. But I do want to start because I remember when this situation unfolded at Sandia National Lab, of course, that being one of the most important employers here in the Albuquerque metro, not just Albuquerque, but the state of New Mexico, one of the most important economic presences here in our state. And you blew the whistle on their pushing of critical race theory. Now, I'm not going to go into too much detail on what that is. We've talked about a fair amount about critical race theory. It's basically racist indoctrination. But what was going on at Sandia, and what did you do about it?
So I will give a quick explanation on critical race theory because it is critical theories in general, and that explanation is just the fact that they split everybody into two groups. You're either an oppressor or an oppressed. So if you're a part of any dominant group, white, Christian, male, anything like that, you are the oppressor and everybody else is oppressed. That is the core of the ideology. Everything else stems from that. And they kind of roll up all this gender ideology and all everything else inside of this ideology. So it is a very racist, sexist, very divisive ideology. And I went back and forth with them for about 4 months after the death of George Floyd because they started pushing this hard. And I said, this is wrong. I didn't even ask them to stop teaching it. I said, if you're going to teach this, then you have to allow me to teach the other side of this because you are giving out misinformation and you are misinforming individuals and misleading everybody. And this was coming from the HR department, upheld by the ethics department and everybody else.
And then we found out that the leadership had been for several years attending what was called white males as full diversity partners. And so they had been engulfed in this from the leadership down at Sandia for probably a decade.
Yeah, and Micayle, she actually did a ton of the research on this, probably I would say 70%, because I was going to work full-time at this point. And so going back and forth for 4 months, creating a training that was intended to teach other people at Sandia what was wrong and what was happening, and just kind of give the other side of the coin to what they were being taught and how it was racist and divisive and it was completely ahistorical. And I was eventually told, sit down, shut up, you've been heard, appreciate it, but we're going to keep doing what we're doing. And that was unacceptable to us. So at this point, it wasn't a question of should we, could we. It was, we felt morally obligated to blow the whistle here and blow it wide open. And we mass emailed a video out that we created. It was an hour long that uncovered what was happening in our national laboratories and what had transpired between myself and the national laboratories. Then we mass emailed that on August 25th of 2020. We mass emailed it out to all 16,000 employees and contractors at Sandia National Laboratories. And after that, there was a big firestorm, went back and forth, and we somehow held on to our job until February of this year.
So you were both employees at the lab?
No,
Yeah.
I was. And I say
Okay.
we, I always use we because
Okay.
she's been in this fight since the beginning, and every decision I made was me and her making that decision, and that is
Fair
our
enough.
career, right? That's obviously us making a decision to put
Right.
our livelihood on the line when we take that risk, and she was very much a part of all of that. So when I say we, I might overuse that.
That's
but,
okay.
So we kept our job until February this year, and then we were eventually fired for refusing. I refused to go along with the vaccine mandates. I said I will not disclose my vaccination status. I will not do forced testing and forced disclosure of medical test results. And they were looking for a reason. I was already on the chopping block. They had suspended my security clearances, and I'd had them suspended. They were supposedly investigating for almost 2 years there, and so they finally found a reason to fire me. But we had already been working on this deeper question of what can we do to fight back? We already knew that my future was not being an electrical engineer. I'd gone through all this training and everything to get this master's degree, and it was already kind of written in the stars that we had gone too far and seen too much, and we realized we have to do more to fight back. When we saw the response that we got, yes, we had some support, but not nearly what we had anticipated. And when you truly see how bad the problem is, we start asking ourselves, we said, what is the core problem? You do that engineering exercise where you really dig down, you say, what is the core problem? And what we came up with is that there has been a breakdown in these institutions and structures in our society that were traditionally used to transfer values from parents to children or from society to children. And you think about it, any of these structures, even take something as ridiculous as school and television, which your school or any entertainment, and your children are in front of these types of devices or at school probably 80 hours a week. They're turned over to school or to pop culture. And when I was a child and I went to school and sat down in front of the television, I would have, most of the values that were transmitted to me through those different structures were stuff that I would probably agree with. Even morning cartoons a lot of times try to transmit some sort of values to you. And we've had a breakdown in those structures. And so we really started asking ourselves, what can we do to change that? What can we do to make a difference? And we came up with Freedom Families United. And it is a national nonprofit organization, a 501c3, and it really is a secular solution to a lot of what churches used to be in the past. In a really rough way, a really bad explanation of our organization is the fact that we are that organization that helps to transfer values from parents to children and between families, that support structure that you want to surround your child with, of influential adults, of
Well,
other
really-
children with aligned values.
So unfortunately, it seems as though right now churches kind of have a moratorium on values, and everybody looks at a church and that's where the values lie. We don't expect them out of entertainment. We don't expect them out of our institutions. We've kind of almost relented and given up on our institutions, and we don't stand up to our institutions, expecting values out of them anymore.
Let me jump in here and come back to where things went with Sandia. So you talk about how President Trump signed an executive order preventing CRT throughout the federal government. That was repealed then by the Biden administration. You didn't
Yes.
lose your job due to the CRT whistleblowing. You lost it due to the vaccine mandate and your refusal to go along with that, right? So just to clarify.
Yes, correct. And it's kind of interesting because an article just came out from the FBI, another whistleblower talking about what's happening in the FBI and how they can't exactly fire people outright or take legal action against them for whistleblowing. So what they're doing instead is they are holding up their security clearances and preventing them from doing their job.
Well, and they pulled your security clearance that day, and they scrubbed like the emails, like they made you go away, and they kicked you off base, and you weren't allowed back.
Yeah, even the
That
email,
day.
people said they hadn't even seen that before. The emails getting completely pulled from the server. They couldn't even access their own emails. They said they never had that happen before, where email got pulled out of their inbox. Not saying it hadn't happened at Sandia, but that a lot of people were telling us that was the first time they had ever seen it happen. And it was, so Donald Trump signing that executive order, and that was kind of crazy because it wasn't even just a month or two after we had started this whole process that we met with, we were able to get in contact with people like Chris Rufo, James Lindsay, people at the Heritage Foundation, talked to a lot of individuals. We got contacted by the Trump administration. They were reaching out to us, investing me for a position in the administration. I imagine it was for the position. They hadn't fully hashed it out with us. We were literally at stage one. This is about 5 stages of vesting. And it would have been to deal with critical race theory problems inside of our federal government and inside of our national laboratories. Because we're talking about national nuclear laboratories. There's only, I believe, 17 national laboratories in the nation and 3 national nuclear laboratories in the nation. So Sandia National Laboratory is absolutely critical to our national security. And you're talking about, they're not just dealing with nuclear weapons. They are dealing with some of the most sensitive and difficult national security challenges. In fact, at Sandia, it's constantly said that if somebody in the private sector can do it, we don't want to do it. They don't want to touch it. A lot of times they come to us with the problems, and the question is this possible? And so some of the work you do is so awesome and so impactful, and at the same time, you can see how some sort of cancerous ideology like this could be so devastating to our national security when you let it spread throughout an organization like our national laboratories or the FBI, like we've heard it spreading completely throughout the national security apparatus.
Well, and at Sandia, we know it was happening because we asked for individuals to email us, any evidence that they had, and we sent all of that to the IG, to at the DOE to investigate. And I don't think it went anywhere because as soon as Biden got elected, we didn't hear anything back. But we had lots and lots of individuals from Sandia, most of them anonymously because they were terrified of losing their jobs or losing their security clearances. But they emailed us a ton of the CRT, the racially divisive stuff, how it was, breaking down their relationships on their teams and stuff like that. It was very sad to see all of it that was going on behind the scenes.
Now, your website, freedomfamiliesunited.com, has a lot of great information, some really cool videos. I've been looking at it a lot here in the last 24 to 48 hours, just trying to get up to speed on all the different things you guys are doing. And you have one video, Raising Lions, Not Sheep. You have other videos on there. And, Mike, I get the impression that a lot of this is about restoring families and trying to provide outlets for people who believe in freedom to get together with those folks. And I know you're a national nonprofit, but you've also got events here in the Albuquerque area because you are in the East Mountains in Albuquerque. And talk a little bit about the events that you guys are organizing and who those are for, what they involve. So
we have to start here, we have to start somewhere, and we're here. And so we have to be the example of how this would function, I guess, nationwide before we can spread out. But we really want to create an outlet for families. We have so many organizations where just a parent shows up or, just one individual shows up and they contribute to the fight. But it really has to be a cultural change. And like Reagan said, that starts around the kitchen table. That starts with the family. And so if we can create, and also conservatives, we stand for specific values, but now a lot of classical liberals and libertarians, our values are being attacked. The family is being attacked. And so we kind of hunkered down in our shell. COVID has really brought that out. And we all feel isolated in not just physically isolated, but isolated with our beliefs and our value systems. And so we really have to break out of that and get back to having communities, having a place where families can come and talk about those important values. And then together we can help restore our institutions.
And I want to inject just 1 second there. So she talked about values and mentioned conservative. The fact is, when we created this organization, it's not about a party necessarily. we have 12 core values. It's probably the most important aspect of our organization is the 12 core American values that we outline on our site, freedomfamiliesunited.com. And that is what we adhere to. It's kind of the basic framework of morality that we're handing off to people that might not have that secular solution right now, might not have that values-based organization that they surround themselves with. And so whenever we're confronted with an issue, we don't run it through a filter of what this person thinks or that personality thinks. It's always, what do our values dictate? And those individuals that are in alignment with our values, we support them. And the minute they turn against our values in any way, shape, or form, we fight against them. We fight for our values, and that is it. And that is extremely important because it's not about tribalism. It is about fighting for values and truth being the highest value among them. You look at people standing up for truth like Project Veritas and how they are demonized now just for standing up for what is truth and factual and actually giving the information what comes out of somebody's mouth. Or you're standing up for truth in a way that you just say a simple statement like a man cannot become a woman, a man cannot get pregnant, and you are vilified for that now. Something that would have seemed obvious and absurd to say otherwise 10 years ago, now it is a litmus test for are you a good person and should we demonize you and cancel you from your place of work and destroy your family.
Now I'm on your Facebook page, and you have a weekly meeting,
Yes.
Thursdays, 6 to 8 p.m., currently listed as Los Vecinos Community Center in Tijeras. Is this an ongoing thing every Thursday?
Yes. So that's one of the points is like legitimately we have to meet frequently and we have to be a community. And so we know what's
In
going
person.
Yeah, we know what's going on locally and we know what's going on at the state level and what's going on in each other's schools and how we can show up and support each other. So if my school, is forcing some kind of a curriculum or a policy that needs to be supported, they can come support us and vice versa. Like last week, we went to an MESD, that's the Moriarty Edgewood School District. We went to their meeting because that community was very concerned about, the equity councils that are going on there. And so, we support each other, and that's so important. And there's strength in numbers. And again, people we're just finding everywhere are still so scared of cancel culture. Meeting in person frequently is just so important.
So I totally agree with you. I just want to jump in and say, I totally agree with you. Meeting in person is great. It's one of the tragedies of COVID that a lot of people fell for, the idea that you could somehow isolate. If you isolated enough, you would somehow stop the spread of this virus. But you mentioned earlier talking about meeting other conservative folks. COVID was kind of an opportunity for us as a family, because we have 3 kids as well, to bolster our network, especially of either conservative or people who are courageous, for lack of a better word, because we weren't going to keep our kids separated from other kids and just let them rot for a year or two, like some people have done, unfortunately.
Yeah.
We made sure to continue meeting and getting together. I mean, there was, 2 weeks to flatten the curve. That was one thing. But after about a month of that, we pretty much realized that we needed to be in this for the long haul and take sustainable practices. And oftentimes it was only the conservative families that were willing to, or libertarian or whatever families that were willing to actually get together, especially at the earlier stages.
Yeah, the lack of courage has been a serious thing that we knew there was apathy in the party, but I think that has really been highlighted. And if you're somebody out there doing something to fight back, something more than just voting, you need to realize that we don't have enough people that are actually, taking action. And you need to step up whatever actions you're already taking. And on top of that, if you're somebody that hasn't taken actual actions other than talking about and complaining about the issue, there's a lot more that you can do. And that's what we're about, is people finding a place to come to, talk to other like-minded individuals. And when you come and you have an hour to give each month or whatever it is to give to this cause outside of what you already do, you want it to be the most effective hour that you might be able to give there. We didn't ask permission to blow the whistle on Sandia National Laboratories. We did not ask permission to go uncover the trainings, this 2-day training that they did over at the PED, where they talked about critical race theory, and they were training up our educators and training up our administrators in critical race theory practices and gender ideology. We didn't ask permission for that. We just went and did it. In fact, we sent all this stuff to Project Veritas after the fact. We did not work with them. We did not ask them permission to be part of Project Veritas. We said, here it is. Either you show what's happening or we will. Same thing. We're not asking permission to continue our undercover investigations. We're not asking permission to fight back. We've been calling these different administrators. We've been calling members of the Public Education Commission. Micayle has been digging deeply into all the documentation, and we've been working through all of that together and uncovering all the stuff that's out there in the open. We're not even doing deep undercover work. They leave all this stuff out in the open for us. We are talking about something that they are so confident in that they have publications, thousands of pages that you have to sift through. Yes, it's very difficult, but the fact is just being brave and doing something, just that simple phrase, be brave, do something, literally something, anything, get out there. This is our children's future. Yes, it takes courage. Yeah, I was canceled. I was fired. If there wasn't some sort of impact, if there wasn't some sort of cost, then you wouldn't need any courage for it. The fact is, like, the cost to us and our family was extreme. I lost a very, very good paying job, and this is a job that was my dream job. This is what I wanted to do for the rest of my life. The best place I could have ever imagined working, and we lose all this money and this investment in our family, and it's terrifying. But I don't care. Whatever we have to do to fight back every single day, we will be doing it. I don't care if we have nothing. The fact is, the future of our children and the future of this nation is too important. I am not going to die and go to the other side and look my ancestors and everybody else in the eye and said, well, I would have done something, but it was a little scary. It was a little too much, that I could have lost my job.
So you've got the videos, you've got the events, you've got a national network that you're in the process of creating. But I definitely want to talk about Project Veritas, and I know you can't maybe let the entire cat out of the bag in terms of what that involves, but this is, of course, James O'Keefe's kind of undercover journalism operation, most notably for taking on Acorn several years ago, but they've done a lot of incredible work. One of the most recent ones was they exposed school administrators up in Connecticut for basically saying they won't hire conservatives, and they got them on camera saying that they just don't hire them. They have a screening process in place to keep people with conservative ideas out of school district management. So
yeah,
tease it a little bit. Tell us when this is all going to be coming out, to the best of the ability that you can. What is, obviously you've got to have some ability to manage your time and resources. How much of your efforts are going to be kind of in this investigative and
well, it depends, because yesterday I got a report from a gentleman across the state in a conservative district, and he said that a daycare worker came to him. No, just vague.
Yeah.
Okay, so a child that comes to their daycare had reported that at school they let them change clothes and pretend to be another gender at school. And she didn't know what to do, but she's afraid to come forward. And so, stuff like this is happening right under the parents' noses and possibly the school's nose. But literally these people didn't know what to do. And so it's like stuff like that, we need to find out who that teacher is. And we need to find out what is going on in that classroom. And for stuff like that, like, I'm willing to dedicate my entire life to saving a class, even one child. And that's when parents have to ask themselves, again, like, what is worth fighting for and what's worth hiding and just, keeping your job for, or not being made fun of in public or cancel culture or whatnot. But stuff like that, I'm like, I'm willing to go to the end of the earth and dedicate my whole life to saving my kid.
And to put that in perspective, just think about that. Think about if that was your only accomplishment and you're made completely destitute after that, but you saved one or more children in that situation. Literally, they are going to a situation where they're destroying their bodies, warping and destroying their psychology, and they are going to die an early death, possibly due to their own hand. And you ask yourself, if that was your only life accomplishment, would you be proud of it? Because I know I would be.
Well, and with critical race theory, it's all these critical theories, like they're just so destructive to everyone involved, and then they're pushing them onto our kids, which I feel like is going to destroy society, not just figuratively, but probably literally. And we have to stand up. We have to stand up and say, this is wrong. And actually do something about it. And so, yeah, we're willing to dedicate everything
And-
to our undercover work if that's what it takes to fight this fight.
And obviously that's a very small part of what we do, because a lot of this goes into us just fighting back. And we fight back in a lot of ways. Even we have a YouTube channel, Freedom Families United, and we put out, we found that putting out videos that add an aspect of comedy to some of these very difficult subjects, even deeper subjects, if it is critical race theory, microaggressions, abortion, things like that, and bringing comedy into it.
We try to be funny. We don't know who we are.
We think we're funny, but anyways, it drags that younger audience into it. And we kind of had that aha moment when we were doing a cousins camp, and one of our nephews was over there on the couch. He's, 14, 15, and he's watching Awake with JP. And JP does these comical skits. And we said, if we're going to reach that other generation, the people that are already in the echo chamber, we don't need to reach them. We don't need another pundit, another voice. What we need is somebody reaching and doing something different. And our work with Project Veritas, we can actually talk kind of, I get pretty in depth about it without giving it all away here. But there was a training over the summer that we had the opportunity to go to, and we're part of our equity council, so we had that opportunity. We signed up for it. It's a 2-day training put on the public education department, and the training was called Building an Equity Bridge. So we went there and put on all the undercover recorders, cameras, whatever else, and then went there and played the part. And for 2 days, they sat here and were indoctrinating our educators and our administrators into this ideology. It was essentially basic training into the critical theories. And at this event, they are talking about, equity. Equity being the definition equity is that you are forced equal outcomes, and that is enforced by a powerful central authority. It's obviously dangerous, because anywhere you're going to implement equity, you are going to cede more and more power to a central authority in order to be able to enforce that. And that's happening in our schools. They say, well, we have to measure this. We have to be able to measure everything, and we have to be able to make it equitable. Therefore, you have to give us more and more power to be able to even and balance the scales. And they are particularly looking along equity along the racial and along gender, lines of gender and sex. And so that's where they're saying, are these outcomes equal? And in this world, they say, oh, this disparity exists, therefore racism. This disparity exists, therefore sexism. And they don't make any other connections than that. That is the 100% of their logic. And they don't say, why does that disparity exist? Are there underlying causes? Can we dig deeper? And in 100% of the cases where we've dug deeper and said, are there other reasons for these disparities existing? Starting with that video we put out at Sandia National Laboratories debunking this ideology, 100% of the time, there's other reasons. There's other very blatantly obvious explanations for why these disparities exist, whether it's in the educational system or it's in the criminal judicial system. Wherever we find it, there's other reasons. And so at this event for 2 days, we went through this process where they're trying to indoctrinate us. They paid $50,000, $50,000 of taxpayer dollars for that hotel. They flew out a individual out there to a speaker and partnered with him. They paid him $50,000, another $10,000 going to a number of other speakers, and then who knows how much going to the administrators. So you're talking over $110,000, $140,000 dedicated to this event to indoctrinate about 60 administrators, 60 educators. And that was only one of many events on their calendar for the Identity, Equity, and Transformation Department here in New Mexico. They had an event every single week, not to that level, but they had some event every single week. They're more active than most churches. They are so passionate, and they do have a cult-like passion for this ideology, and they truly feel that pull of a higher purpose. They feel like this is the most important thing they could be doing on earth.
So I want to ask you what maybe the toughest question that you get, which is you've got the cultural aspect that you're trying to impact with your organization and uniting families and getting people together. You've got the undercover journalism aspects as well. And I know, you're not a think tank. We're a think tank, and we're trying to work through the problems in a lot of similar contexts, but through different approaches. Do you consider or have you seen policy approaches that would address some of these issues? I know we had a meeting the other night. Got to see you guys for the first time about APS and a parents' rights initiative at the school board. I'm not saying that you guys should get involved in the legislature or whatever, but do you have obviously the undercover journalism tends to help with pushing various policy priorities. Not that you would necessarily do that, but where do you see these policies needing to be enacted, or what can be done to change some of this?
So the policies are pretty straightforward. They've already been implemented. We're not doing anything new. The policies, for example, the executive order, that is kind of the framework of the type of policies that would defeat this. And secondarily, the policies, the biggest policy that you can say in general that defeats all of this is transparency. Whether it's gender ideology, critical race theory, whatever it is, and no matter where it is, when you shed a light on it, when you have complete transparency saying the parents have to be involved in this, involved in that, for example, the new push from the public education department and from New Mexico's current administration to get counselors in every single school, to get a school counselor, they're a resource there for every child for mental health resources. On one hand, that sounds really good. We have a high suicide rate, we've got high depression rates, and we need these resources. On the other hand, if you don't have transparency involved in that, we may very well see what's been happening around the rest of the country happening here in New Mexico, where these counselors are going way beyond their normal duties and encouraging these children to take up other ideologies, taking these children off to the side, and they come in and they say, oh, you're depressed. Do you feel comfortable in your body? No, maybe you should wear your hair up. Maybe you should do this. Maybe you should do that. Maybe, have you ever thought maybe you're not a girl or maybe you're not a boy? Like those type of things. When you implement transparency, when you force it into the law, that destroys this ideology. When you force these types of things to just be transparent, nothing more than that, not even dictating what they do, then this completely crumbles and falls apart. Because if you show parents what's happening behind the scenes, if you show them what they're saying in private, the problem solves itself.
Well, and I think too, so one thing that I've been trying to do a lot this past several months is the equity council. So there's the identity, equity, and transformation division that was made the umbrella, I guess, over all of the education acts that are legislated. And so the equity councils was the PED's solution to the Martinez-Yazzie case. And so, but it's full of critical race theory. So we have to get the critical race theory aspects out of the legislature. And so I feel like that's very essential. And so I went to the PEC to start with, the Public Education Commission, because there are elected officials in the education system. And even though they don't have a lot of power legislatively,
they've been gutted.
Yeah. And but they are our elected officials, so I felt like they're morally obligated to stand up for constituents' values and beliefs. And so I went to all of them, and a lot of them had no idea what was going on inside of these trainings. They had no idea what was inside of the resources or materials, and they were a little bit outraged. And so I got them to get it on their discussion docket. So step back a second. The leadership of the equity councils at the state level and at the head of the PED said they wanted to make equity councils statute in law. And so that's when I said, we need to make sure we nip this in the bud and stop it before it becomes a monster that we can't tame in statute.
And equity, just real quickly, is a tell word that means the exact opposite of equality. Equality under the law, equality of treatment. Equity means that you actively discriminate against certain groups for the benefit of other groups.
And from the get-go, because it's based off of the Martinez-Yazzie case, they use that as the the excuse for everything they do within it. They said, history has to be taught in a culturally sensitive way. We have to represent every culture equally or equitably. And even the membership on the boards of these equity councils they're requiring one in every school district and every public charter school. And they have racial quotas for the membership on the boards. And so just from the get-go, it's all based on race, and it's heinous, right? It breaks down these kids and their parents and the administrators just based off of the color of their skin.
And everywhere you go where they explain equity, and this isn't just in New Mexico, this is throughout the nation and around the world. When they use the talk about this idea of equity versus equality, they will use this graphic, and you can look it up. If you type in equity versus equality and do Google Images, you will see this image of three individuals standing looking over a fence, and there's three boxes, big crates under them, one under each individual, and they say this is equality. And there's a tall individual, a medium, and a short individual. One of them can't see over the fence, the other one can barely see over the fence, and the tall guy has plenty. And they say equity is when you take this box from the tall individual and give it to the short individual, and then everybody sees over the fence. And the problem with that is those boxes actually represent what those individuals earned, right? And then if you could actually expand out and zoom out and look at this image and realize what equality truly is, you would see the men on the outskirts of that photo standing there with guns to enforce that equality. And that is the problem with this idea. It is forced equality, and it has to be enforced by a powerful central authority, because that's the only way you are ever going to get equality, is if you have a powerful central authority ensuring it happens.
Yeah, my picture would involve all three of them with just their eyes right below the fence line so they couldn't see anything, because that's what equity really involves, is tearing everybody down at the same time, no matter how high they may be.
That is the result. Yes, definitely.
Now, Mike, we're almost to the end of this, but you have two beautiful children on your Facebook page. I'm a parent. Obviously, this is most impactful. This kind of effort is most impactful to the next generation. Just personally, do you homeschool your kids? How do they react to this kind of thing? Have they imbibed of the spirit of freedom, or
they do. We have a lot of deep conversations at home. I don't know if they enjoy them all the time, but they do ask a lot of questions, and I do love talking to them about this stuff. They were homeschooled all through COVID. And when we just started fighting back and building this organization, we did send them. We're lucky enough to live in the East Mountains, where they have the Estancia Valley Classical Academy that has Hillsdale College curriculum. Wow. And so that's been really great. Although they do have an equity council, even after we've showed them all of this terrible stuff that's inside it at their last governing council meeting.
They're scared to eliminate the equity council, even them.
They voted to keep it. They had a proposal to eliminate it, and then they voted to keep it. So
interesting. Well, Estancia Valley Classical Academy is still a great institution.
Yes, it is. It is
something that we've had the head of the school on here on the podcast, and we've also
which head of the school?
That's a good question. I've had the lady on 2 different times though.
Ms. Rivera.
I believe so.
Jennifer Rivera.
Yes.
Yeah. She is a good lady.
She also got married, so she changed her name at some point.
It was Adams.
Okay.
Or was it? Yeah.
Yeah. So
like
that makes it more difficult to remember names. But anyway, well, yeah, I think it's great. I think, again, check out the Facebook page. That has more of the details on the weekly events that you guys put on.
And I would like to say people can get directly in contact with us. If you either are fighting back, or you want to fight back, or you just need that freedom community to connect together and make another touch bases with your kids again on values and help to support them and surround them with like-minded individuals, you can also just call and text us anytime on our number at 505-405-1776. That's 505-405-1776, and we will get back to you and get you plugged in and fighting back and see if we can make a difference together.
Yeah, I appreciate your time today, and best of luck. We're definitely right there with you guys on so many of these issues, and trying to save New Mexico, of course, as well. That's a critical factor in all of this. But thanks for listening to this week's episode. Find all episodes at tippingpointnm.com or at the Rio Grande Foundation's YouTube channel. Subscribe to this show at Apple, Stitcher, or have your Google Home play Tipping Point New Mexico. Thanks to Path 3 Marketing for producing this show.